Welcome, everyone, to this night's episode of Pivotal Change. This is a show all about leadership, growing business owners and managers, supervisors, entrepreneurs, or anybody that's trying to increase their ability to influence and gain followership. And we do all of this through this platform here by bringing guests on our show that can help us in many different capacities. So I've got two special guests. Both are good friends of mine on the show. And the first one here is an expert in the area of change management. He's been working with companies and firms all over the country for over 20 years, helping them drive the necessary changes into their teams, their workflows, and their leadership positions to really help people reach that moment of pivotal change and increase their success. I would like to introduce you to Will Hill, my friend from Will Hill Consults. Thank you for coming on the show, sir.
Ryan, it is my privilege. Thank you for having me on.
Excellent. Well, I know I always like to jump right into things. We'll cut to small talk when you and I cut to commercial break, but I want to jump in talking about the leadership category, and I want to hear how you define effective leadership in the context of managing organizational change.
So, the first thing I would say is that we're sound in the decision making. And sometimes we think about leadership and change management. If we think we're successful, we're always pushing change. I would pause that button for a moment and say, we're selecting the right changes. And when we're challenged about, is this the right thing to do? We've done the due diligence to know that we can confidently step forward. So to me, I think being really sound in the decision making up front is a critical piece. The second area I would say is that we've got really good communication through the change. If you look at a lot of change efforts that are led, Ryan, in different organizations, we'll communicate heavily when we start, but then once we kind of get, I don't know, 25% in, we stop talking about it. We stop talking about expectations. We stop talking about what needs to happen differently. And all of a sudden, people are kind of left twisting out in the wind like, wait, are we done? Did we finish? And then rarely do we do any kind of retro on the back end of things to go, hey, what went well? What didn't went well? We are done. Here's been the impact of the change. So you got to keep that communication clarity up through the whole process, Ryan.
Ooh, I like that a lot. So I'm picking out a couple of pieces here. Is don't change just for the sake of making change. I would say you and I probably agree that most leaders recognize that change is going to happen. It needs to happen. You need to take control of the change when it's time and when it comes. But you just said make it purposeful change. I really like that. And one thing that's fun, Will, if you ever want to let anybody know that this is something they should write down, I always encourage the viewers to watch with a notepad, and hopefully some of them do that. So that kind of gives me a little inkling to ask this next question here. So speaking of the entrepreneur side of things, strategically managing change to drive growth and innovation is kind of what you were getting into in their business. How can an entrepreneur do that strategically? Like I said, how can they get the strategy for that?
So I think that first of all, we need to make sure that we're solving specific pain points. So I want to identify, and when I say pain point, it could also be an opportunity, right? It doesn't Sometimes we think about change as just fixing what's broken, but sometimes change is really about bringing in the opportunity that's there in front of us. It starts with the top down. I have to know first, where are we going as an organization? What's our mission? I'm sure you've talked to your viewers about mission and vision before, Ryan, but what's our mission? What are we trying to do? And then I can back into, hey, here's an opportunity to help us get there faster, stronger. Here's a weak area we need to shore up. And so I need to make sure that the changes we're putting are really in tight alignment with what we're trying to achieve as an organization. If I have to really work hard to convince my team that this change is related to the business, I'm starting out on two left feet in the wrong position, whatever analogy you want to use right in there. But if I can clearly say, hey, we're doing change X, as you can see, it's going to impact our goal and mission with this business. And everyone goes, yeah, you're absolutely right. It is. I'm in a good position to lead strategically well from there forward.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think going with my theme of mission and vision being absolutely critical, you've definitely hit the nail on the head on that one. But painting that clear picture, like you said, and connecting that with the people that will are going to be affected by the change. So you clearly see these hot topic points. So let me ask a little more specifically in the realm of strategy, boiling it down to maybe some skills. What
Mm,
organizational skills should most, or what is going to be pretty crucial? I don't want to say all of them, but what are going to be some of the
yeah.
most crucial skills for leaders that are trying to develop and navigate through these periods of significant change?
One of them is a mental skill of saying, I am going to value success over ownership. Now, if you're the entrepreneur and the business owner, you're like, wait a minute, I own this thing. But if you want to really leverage your team as you move forward, I want to value the success of this change, not the fact that I orchestrated every little nook and cranny of the change. You
Yeah.
see, our teams are most committed and bought into change when they're part of the change process, as opposed to just having everything dictated to them. So I want to set the vision, set the road markers, and then identify for my team underneath, hey, here's a component. Here's where we're going. You guys own this component. Here are the parameters, here are the boundaries. You're going to go from A to D. That's your space. I don't care how we get there. You know what the objective is. You guys do the research. What's going to be the best element of that change? When we're there, I'm bringing the next group in that might own from D to G, wherever those steps are that we use as we go through, Ryan. So I think that is a really crucial piece, is that mindset in there. The second kind of skill, if I were to look at it that way, is a willingness to admit you're wrong. I know this
Mm.
isn't like a normal skill we think of, but if you charge down this hill and you pick up some bad vibes, is not very scientific of a term, Ryan, but we step in, we start to trip over things. There's signs that we're going down the wrong road. We need to be willing to say, okay, I was wrong. This isn't going to work. Let's back up. What are we really, are we, let's go back. Is this tied to our mission? Where do we go astray? And then be able to focus and push through, right? Third one, motivation. I need to be able to motivate my team to push through. Every change has its own difficulty. And so when I think about motivation, I think about the bi-directional nature of change, Ryan. There's where we're going, but there also is where we're leaving from on the back end, right?
Mm.
And so I need to be able to really articulate well the value proposition that we're chasing, the pain that we're leaving behind. Hey, we've never had a solution. We've suffered to help our clients. So this is where we're going with our new solution. See, I don't just say, here's where we're going. I have to talk about where we're leaving behind. That helps me bring that motivation together for the entirety of the team. So those are three that I'll just pick on and highlight for you, Ryan.
Yeah, I think those are great things to highlight because I know you said one time along the way it wasn't such a scientific statement or answer, but it really is a little bit that you can train somebody to own up to the mistakes. You know, I think
Mhm.
we get that kind of trained out of us as we age and we grow, and then you can retrain that. And I think that's a crucial skill is to have the ability to vocalize that. Maybe we internalize it and recognize it. And the team never hears that we owned up to our mistake and then re-navigate it. But I think that's really important. Another thing I'd like to draw out is how you said to basically empower your people and keep them motivated. And they're going to have input and action and the ability to implement not just ideas, but change into the change process. And it makes me think of George Patton. He has a really good quote. It says, "Don't tell people how to do things, tell them what to do and let them surprise you with the results." And that's coming from a guy that was pretty significantly successful. Let me ask one more question before we jump into break and cut our conversation here in half. But can you explain a little bit about workflow systems? Because now we're kind of boiling it down to a little bit more of the minutia, the workflow systems that will be implemented and help ensure that there is a smooth transition during the organizational change periods.
Yeah. So I was speaking actually earlier this week to a group of business owners and leaders in business about change management. And I asked them, there were about 20 in the room or so. And I said, how many of you have a consistent process that you put each change through, whether it be a technology change, a process change, or procedures and policy change? Zero.
Yeah.
I'd asked that same question a year before in a group of about 40. There were two. This to me sticks out as a big issue of we need to have a process that we put this change through. So whether we're using a workflow tool to track where we are in the process, or maybe we're using something really fancy like Excel. That's kind of lame, I know. But if we're able to know these are our stages of change, and early on during the change planning, we're putting dates around those stages, we're putting budget times, checkpoints, that sort of thing that's into the workflow. When we're able to create a common language, it's easier to talk about it. So I say, hey, Ryan, I know we're changing. Remember, we're in phase two. When we changed the prior system and we got to phase three, it really felt like all downhill from there and we were running fast. So stick with me. We got phase three coming up, right? Or if someone wants to know where's this change sitting, if we have a common workflow and a common language, I don't have to explain everything that's been done. I refer to it by the stage, the phase name, and we're able to quickly communicate very effectively about where we are through the process.
Yeah, I love that a lot. So through CS Business Consulting, when we advise people, we do that same thing. We force a timeline into everybody that we work with. And then we put specific markers in that timeline. We give weeks or months, and we have minimum 3 goals per phase of the timeline. I love to hear how your brain works and you're implementing successful change for so many people. And I think that identifying that we've got the idea that we need to change, either for opportunity or to fix something negative, and we're going to put the change into a change process. I think that's just a wonderful thing to impart. So one thing I'm going to do here real quick, Will, is we're going to go ahead and stop here to jump over to a commercial break. Stick with us, and audience, stick with us. We're going to get more of Will the Wise here, and he's going to help you navigate and get some ideas so you can keep working on ways to change and improve and be successful in your industry. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everyone, and thank you for sticking with us. We are on the second half of the conversation with my good friend Will Hill of Will Hill Consults, and we've been talking all about change management, identifying ways to change, what are some crucial steps and ways to start implementing workflow, and we've been hitting those topics, and we're going to jump right into the next question so we can fit everything in on this segment. So, Will, next question, my man. I want to talk about measuring the change. So, how do you measure specifically the success of any of the change management initiatives that you've undertaken? And what indicators do you look for to kind of ensure that you've got that long-term sustainability?
Well, let me tell you something. If I were to take a tape measure out to my driveway and measure a random part of the driveway, that measurement would mean absolutely nothing because I have not defined what I'm measuring. When we go to put change in place, the very first thing, even when we're evaluating change options, let's say we're selecting a new technology tool and we're comparing which one we want to pick from, I have to define success then. I cannot wait and go, I think this is going to drive new sales. We'll measure new sales when we're done.
Mhm.
Measure it against what? Like we had some new sales, therefore it was successful. Like we have to define success before we start the change. And this will allow us to put the right markers in along the change. So let's say that we're changing our sales process. I'll just keep picking on it for right now. And so we've decided on our sales process. We say, hey, we want to see a 15% increase in lead opportunity and a 5% increase in close rate as a result of this change. Well, if I'm going to put this out in phases, I can then start to measure and extrapolate those numbers and say, how are we doing? Because the first part of the measurement is going to be on the lead obtaining that we go through and lead qualifying before we even wonder if we're hitting the close rates or not. If we aren't hitting the increase in opportunity goals, that should be a red flag to us that we're not going to hit the close rate goals that we want to on the backside, most likely. So we need to step back and go, what have we not done well with this change? What do we need to adjust? You know, don't forget, your plan for change is flexible. It's okay to shift pace and go, we got to slow down, or, ooh, we're rocking and rolling. It's time to punch the accelerator. and let's take this up a little bit faster because things are going where we're going. But if you don't have the measurables in place along the way, you'll never know when it's the right time to change the pace. So that's a critical element there, Ryan.
I absolutely love that. I think that's completely awesome to say that you must identify and define what success is before you even launch off on trying to make the change. I think that's so important. I do a lot of teaching and preaching, and my style is always to start whatever I'm talking about with definitions so that everybody's on the same base, talking in the same, speaking the same language as you used earlier. And I just really want to hammer that into the audience that it has to be done on the front end.
Ryan, let me jump back in on that for just a moment. And
Absolutely.
I think where this really starts is when you're evaluating options up front. I had a conversation with someone leading a business unit that said, "Hey, I'm comparing product A and B, and I'm really struggling with how do I compare them against one another to pick the right solution for us." And I told her to stop. So you're
Mhm.
not comparing the solutions against one another. You already told me early on what your goals for this transition are. I'm comparing each of those options against the standard in the middle of what my goals are. And that should illuminate which one we're going to pick. And then we keep using that same standard measurement on through. So even early on, if you're picking options, that standard of success, that measurement is what you're comparing to, not against the different options one to the other.
Nope, I think that's great. I could go off on about 10 different tangents on real world examples, but for the sake of time, I won't, because that is such an important component that I hope people heard and wrote down. So I do want to jump over to mindset. I think mindset, everything has to start with mindset as far as being ready for life and being ready to take anything on. So tell us how to approach the challenge of getting the teams to align their mindset with the strategic goals during all of this change period.
Sure. So, one of the things we've got to recognize is that everyone comes with their own mental and psychological history that's
Mhm.
there. And part of that history that's there in that context is how they view their value, right? So, Ryan, let's say, because I work with a lot of accounting firms, let's say that I'm a bookkeeper and we're going to change the tool that I use as a bookkeeper. I may go, wait a minute, but I know how to use the existing tool really, really well. And I may not verbalize this to you, but internally, I'm going to hold back my discretionary effort that I could feed into this change. I may amp up my negativity because I feel at risk, not because I don't like change. That's a cop out answer,
Right.
right? If we really didn't like change, this world would look totally different. We thrive on change. We don't like change without purpose, and we don't like change when it threatens safety. And so, there, I would say, does your team understand how you see their value? So, I've had firm owners go to their people and say, "Hey, tell me where you see your value." Well, I'm good at using the tool, I'm accurate, and I'm fast. And the owner's sitting there scratching their head, go, no, you can see problems before they happen. You communicate with our clients well. They see their value in a very different way. Don't take for granted that your team sees your value the same way, sees their value the same way that you see their value. So if you're seeing some pullback, I would just go back to, hey, tell me a little bit about where you believe you add the most value to this team. And I want to redirect their mentality around where their value is so that they don't see their value as being bogged down in the tools and the steps and the clicks and the interactions, because their value is greater than that. And most of these changes are there to bring their value greater, more to the surface,
Right.
expose it more. Who doesn't want to be more valued, Ryan? Right. And so as I connect that dot, then I can really bring them in with the change and have them start pedaling faster. I guess we'll go with a bicycle analogy.
I like it. No, I like that a lot. And I mean, I couldn't have paid you to have made a comment like that. The mindset that we transition to in the five M's is a value based mindset, seeing yourself and seeing your people based on their value and not sets of skills and personalities and things like that. So, that open communication, that talking to your people, and spurring on those conversations of the value, just like the kind of mock conversation you just did, I think is a huge component. Thank you for bringing that to light. Let me see if we can knock out two more questions. One, I want to talk more about strategy. I like strategy. Specifically in maintaining productivity. Sometimes when we try something new, like you just said, well, I'm accurate and fast in the current software, I'm going to slow down and be less efficient for a while if I'm trying something new. There is a learning curve. So, what strategies do you recommend to the people watching to help keep one, the morale up, and two, the productivity up in the midst of change?
Sure. So the first thing is you need to recognize that people can only handle so many new things at one particular point in time. And even though a change may just hit one particular department, well, that may actually affect your office admin team, and they're also affected by other departments. So we have to kind of watch some of the overlap and say, I don't want to be pushing too much at one particular point in time. Then we're going to come back to we measured success early on and we defined what it's going to be early on. So I'm going to come back and say, hey, when we roll this out, Ryan, I expect in the first couple of weeks, as you get used to this new tool, you're probably going to be down about 7%. And we expect that. Then we're going to see that bounce back to only down 2% in week 3. And we're hoping to see 5% or more starting week 4. So I'm going to give a time frame to it. And then I've got to communicate about what's happening, and I've got to share it out. I've got to share it out. I'll go back to something I said earlier on in our interview in the last segment, Ryan. We quit talking about the change after we're like a quarter of the way in and we tail down.
Right.
I need to go out to the rest of the team and say, hey, great news. We expected Ryan to only slack off by 7%, but he only slacked off by 5%. So we're ahead of pace of where we're hoping to be. This has been the impact so far. I need to communicate progress and communicate impact with the whole team of what's going on as we move through there. I think the
That's
other
great.
thing it does is someone works with you, Ryan, and they go, oh, Ryan's at the center of this change. Maybe I ought to get off his back about getting me that one document that I've been waiting for because he's got something big going on. Those are the kind of team morale items that can help as we communicate clearly.
That's good. Well, let me jump in with this last question. We only got about a minute left. Um, Common pitfalls. I want you to give us our hazards and warnings here. What are some common pitfalls that the leaders are going to encounter when they go in and they try to implement, they try to follow the processes and the strategies that you've given us? And how can those be avoided?
Yeah. Um, Number one, they ignore their people. I'm not saying
Mm,
their people are always right, but they ignore them. And we don't close feedback loops. If someone's got a concern or thinks that a different change ought to be a priority, we can't just sit and nod and go, thank you, I'll consider that. We have to go back and say the result of where it is. We've already talked about measurement a ton, so I'll leave it there. But the third one I'll mention is then shiny penny syndrome. We've seen it. You might find a great tool to solve problem X, but then that software vendor says, hey, you know what else this tool can do? And it looks fancy and nice, but it's completely off mission and off strategy of what you're trying to do. So we've got to come take, maybe you got a change charter document or something, and we got to hold on to it and go, nope, don't care. I got to focus here where we're centrally focused on what matters.
excellent. That is great. So, well, you've just really poured out a ton of wisdom, a ton of great techniques and strategies. And I can very much see that there's probably going to be some people that want to talk to you a lot deeper about each of these categories. So if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, use your services, find you in any way, how do they get a hold of you?
Sure. Email is fantastic. Will at willhillconsults.com. Also, I'm very active on LinkedIn as well. So if you jump out to LinkedIn, do a search for Will Hill, look for kind of a goofy looking guy, you'll see me out there, and happy to connect that way as well.
Awesome. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show today. And I just want to, once again, I'll follow up with you and we'll talk more. We'll keep strategizing and planning on to help people with their changes. But thank you again for coming on. And for everyone else, stay tuned for our next guest. We'll be right back after this commercial break. Welcome back again, everyone, and thank you for sticking with us through the break. We have our very next guest on tonight's episode of Pivotal Change, and he is a very good friend of mine. Jason Hawkins is the owner of Three Rivers Martial Arts and Wellness, or Three Rivers Self Defense and Wellness in Paducah, Kentucky. He's been my personal martial arts instructor for well over a decade, and he is a man who has studied all over the world under some of the highest achieving masters and has just an incredible depth and wealth of knowledge in all areas in life and business, being a business owner himself. And I just want to welcome you to the show. Jason, thank you for coming on the show today, sir.
Thanks, Ryan. I was really excited when you asked me to come on. I like what you were describing that you guys are trying to get across to everybody. This is great. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, it's my pleasure. I think you have a lot to offer. Something that's really fun is I like to ask my audience to try to watch the show, not just as some casual business show in the background, but with a pen and paper and maybe take some notes to really try to get that pivotal change in their life. But I want to jump straight into the first question for you, and it's about your journey. So, your journey in martial arts, tell us how that has shaped your approach to leadership, and not just, in the training room and at the gym, but in your professional life as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing about martial arts, I think that some people, I mean, you can approach it for different ways. Mostly people will say self-defense or some just enjoyment and sense of community and things like that. But at the very heart of it, if you really think about it, how you're approaching it, it has to do with conflict, right? And our lives, we live in a physical duality in that live in a world of opposites, right? And a natural byproduct of all of that is conflict. Now, we can look at that and bemoan it, or we can say that maybe we're here to harmonize that in some way. And I think martial arts, when you look at philosophically, that's its purpose. I'm taking some sort of conflict, in our case, as a martial artist, on a physical level, and you're either neutralizing it or nullifying it in some way. And so this management of duality, this management of conflict is at the root of the practice. However you come at it or whatever art you come at it, you do techniques in the beginning, and then you kind of start realizing, well, okay, that's all well and good. I defend myself. I can do this throw. I can do this kick, and that's fine. But, if it's only good for the hour that I'm on the mat, then it's not worth much. I need to be able to walk off the mat with something and it help my everyday life, as a business owner and as with your family and coworkers and things like this. And Ryan, I think that idea of how do we manage a conflict from the technical aspect all the way through the interpersonal and philosophical aspect, that's what martial arts offers. And so those tactics that you pick up on the mat, if you've got a good teacher and you can think about it some, you'll immediately see how they work in the real world. And I don't mean, you're physically fighting your family or anything like that, but the principles that you're using on those techniques will work and help you manage and harmonize the conflict, which I think is the main idea of all of us being here, not just martial arts.
Oh, I think that's it. Very beautifully put and very well said. And I think it's maybe a line of thinking that most people are foreign to. We get so caught up in the day to day and trying to increase our techniques and increase our skill set that we lose on the harmonizing side of it and the thing that really allows us to work through friction and conflict. I think that's a beautiful statement. So kind of pushed along, the harmonizing and the balance side of things. What way has the martial arts training and the martial arts teaching influenced your ability to stay calm, to make decisions under pressure, and to be a better business owner?
There's a concept, and I'm an avid yoga practitioner as well, and I think those fit together really nicely. We could do a whole segment on just that, but there's a concept that's common to both, and it was a word I heard it through the yoga training, but then it started coming up in the martial arts more and more, and this term is equanimity. I had not heard this term before. So the Webster's definition of that is an evenness of mind under stress. And I don't know that there's anything else that would be more helpful in your day-to-day life than to be able to do that. Because that act alone, and where that comes up, Ryan, is through, I guess you would say, kind of a stress inoculation. If we can go into the academy and use that as our laboratory, you know, and we know we've got people that care about us in there that are working with us to get better, but are going to challenge us at the same time. They can, in a certain way, they can offer us the resistance, right, and the force that we can little by little, by increments, learn to adjust our nervous system so that we can remain and stay in this even state through pressure, through stress, and in some way we get inoculated to it to a degree. And once again, if we carry that off into our business life and things like that, when things come up and we're put under pressure, either mentally, emotionally, or physically, we're able to tap back into that state of being. And the more
Yeah.
times that we enter into that state, we get better. Everything's a skill. Everything is a skill. And I think some people feel like that there are things just that are just beyond them. You know, my ability to control my emotions, my ability to control my breath, some of the autonomic nervous processes of the body we feel like is beyond us. But our ancestors have showed us that's not true. We have
Right.
access to these things, and there are ways to practice. And martial arts, being a very concrete form of conflict management, can give us these clues and allow us to weekly, bi-weekly, 3 times a week, enter into this state of equanimity, or at least attempt it. You know, as I was always told, to try to be better is to be better. So I may not hit the nail on the head every time, but if I can expose myself to that state with my friends, and you can say, well, yeah, but it's not really stress. Your buddies are in there. But you know, as
No,
well as
it's
I do, when you're on bottom and kind of being crushed by that guy and you're having trouble getting your breath, your nervous system will react. And I
right.
know it's you, like I know it's you, Ryan. I know you're really not going to hurt me, but your body will have those reactions, right? And
Absolutely.
and so we still have to learn to enter into that state little by little. And if we do it intelligently and move with the
Yeah.
nervous system, then you're as much as you can expose yourself to that state of equanimity, the more you'll be able to pull it up when you need it, whether it's in business and it's an interpersonal conflict or a judgment you have to make or just to trust yourself, you know. And like another definition that I have of equanimity, besides the Webster one, is the ability to observe without judgment. So,
Mm.
and that goes for yourself, you know, going in there and getting on the mat. If you have a bad time, you don't think you did that well, make notes about it and say, okay, I didn't do too good. But then move on, make the observe it, but don't judge it. It is what it is, and you'll get the effect, but just go to improve. So if you can keep your mind calm in the midst of that, if someone's in your face or, you know, a conversation you don't want to have with someone, but if you can remain even in that, then you can hope that the results will be good that will come out of it.
Gotcha. So let me ask you about this. So I'm a big quotes guy. Thomas Jefferson is full of great quotes, and he has a quote. And you tell me how this resonates with equanimity and your
Mm-hmm.
perception. The
Mm-hmm.
benefits of martial arts training to therefore produce equanimity is, says
Mm-hmm.
nothing gives one person so much advantage over another as to remain cool and unruffled under all circumstances.
Absolutely. So to me, that would be the definition of equanimity. He's basically said it, and I think he's right. I really don't think anything trumps it. I mean, you know, look, if we can add a physical skill to that,
Hmm.
it would be good to back it up because you know we can. Yeah, I used to hate it when we had the, you know, I don't know if it still is popular in a lot of schools, but they would have these anti-bullying programs,
Right.
and prior to that, you know, there's a lot of, oh, just stand up to the bully, and I'm like, well, you know, okay, that's probably true, maybe, but if the kid doesn't have anything to back that up,
Right.
the bully's going to smell it a mile away. He's a pro at this. He's practiced doing it. So there needs to be something that helps you do that and remain unruffled. So the question becomes, how do I remain unruffled? And I think it's some sort of practice like that. And
Definitely.
and it's at least and these practices are old. They've been around. You don't have to
Thousands
go
of,
far.
yeah.
Thousands of years old. This is a human problem. You know, you know what I mean? Like it's a human problem that I guess we're not getting better at it. We just come at it different ways.
Sure.
Does that
Well,
make
let me ask you
sense?
this question about
Yes.
equanimity. 'Cause I like to draw something from a prior conversation we've had. So part of equanimity is that kind of that sine and cosine curve from the math world. And if things are really getting excited, moving too fast and too dangerously, or they're starting to get out of control, is part of equanimity the ability to draw that down to a baseline. And kind of the opposite
Yeah.
is true. Things are going too slow and unproductively in our lives.
Yes.
We have to
Exactly.
develop equanimity to bring it back up to that baseline. Can you
I
expand on
think.
that in the next
Yeah. I
minute
think
or so?
exactly. Yeah. Exactly that. Exactly. Looking at an unskilled conflict as a sine wave, in this up and down movement, and equanimity being the line that cuts through the middle. In a fight, I don't want if an attacker comes in and is bigger and larger than you and is very explosive, I don't want to match him move for move, right? If
Right.
he's bigger and stronger and faster than me, if I follow that sine wave up, I'm surely going to be defeated, right? At some point, an untrained person can't sustain that, and they will drop down on that sine wave again. And as they get to the bottom of it, that's your chance. However, if you're taking the ride on the roller coaster along with them, you're going to get smashed, all the way through. But if I can maintain that midline, and that's considerable discipline, that's considerable training, but it's not beyond the householder. I
Right.
think people think you have to have something special or go to the mountains or do something like that. But you can have a family, have a job, and there's a way to approach this. There's an integral way to put it into your life,
Yep.
and without disrupting your family. There's a way to do it,
Well,
and
Jason, let
and
me
and
jump
not
in here
following.
real
Yeah, sure.
because you're making some good points, and I want to pick those questions up because we're going to jump to
Mhm.
break and we're going to talk
Okay.
about how that helps your family and that plugs into the business.
Okay.
But right now, we're going to jump to break. So everyone,
Okay.
stay tuned to Pivotal Change to hear this final segment about how this starts to apply to your life, and you can have the equanimity and the advantages of training in martial arts to your business and your family. We'll be right back. Welcome back from the break for our final segment of this evening's episode of Pivotal Change. And we are speaking with Jason Hawkins right now. And he is a martial arts expert with an incredible background that would probably take the rest of the segment to describe what he has done in his lifetime. And he's also the owner of Three Rivers Self Defense in fitness in Paducah, Kentucky. So he's a very good friend of mine. And we have been talking about martial arts and its influence on your business life, your personal life, and relationships, and how it helps you to become a better person and leader. So, we just came off the topic of equanimity, and now we're going to go into a question, Jason, that I want to ask about the principles that come from training martial arts. And how do you apply those principles like equanimity into managing a team or running a business or navigating those relationships and families?
Okay. Well, we were talking about equanimity and that ability to keep an even mind under stress. Now, if that's accomplished, then whatever techniques or tactics that will become more clear and what's applicable. And I was thinking, when you were asking me that question, there's the one of the martial arts that we practice is jujitsu that's become really popular over the time. And the translation of jujitsu, the first character, Ju, is gentle, often translated as gentle or yielding. But some other translations of it are yielding or allowing or subtle. These are other things. And it doesn't sound like, oh my gosh, that doesn't sound like fighting. There's some hard exchanges there too. And that's true. But this particular principle you were talking about translating to your family and your business, this idea of allowing things, if you do have this evenness of mind, this centeredness under stress, the ability to go inward and hold yourself still and be able to listen and observe to some external thing coming in, whether that's a punch or a comment you don't like or a
Hmm.
situation you don't like. It's all traveling towards you from this outside stimulus, and my senses are picking it up and processing it. But if I've trained myself to calm myself internally, that's a form of equanimity, right? That's holding my mind and my responses steady. Then if I apply this tactic of jujitsu, or this idea of allowing things to come and go, and I think sometimes people think that means kind of just almost falling down and letting yourself be crushed. But there's an element of fortitude. There's this dynamic, right, between hard and soft that we see. And if I don't have this internal fortitude, then the other ones, they don't matter at all, right? So I have to have a balance of these both. So if I'm in conflict, say we're having trouble at home, and you're having to make a hard decision, or you're in your business, you have to have a conversation with someone, whether it's an employee or a customer that you don't want to. The ability, in my experience, the ability to keep your emotions at bay and centered within yourself, which you have to do when you're under stress in a conflict. If your emotions override you, they're going to inhibit your movement, your thought, all that becomes interrupted. And if you can hold that center by, sounds interesting. It was always interesting to me. I had a teacher give me a method of saying, just if you can feel the energy in your hands and put your attention on it and feel you've just drawn your body inward or your attention inward, you can still have attention outward simultaneously. I can hear everything that this person's saying and what they're doing, but by anchoring myself inside the body, I have a solid point that won't pull me off center and my emotions take over. So it takes a little bit of practice, but if you can do it, I often tell people, if you're standing in line at Walmart or something and you don't want to be there, something it's not dangerous, but you don't particularly want to be doing it, see if you can center yourself like that and at least feel the energy in your hands and put your attention there, but still be very aware of your surroundings. And I've had people tell me before, I was talking to my wife about this, and she was like, but how can you hear what the other person is saying? And I said, you actually hear better. Same way when I'm training with somebody, if I can do that while I'm training, I can feel the moves better. I become more responsive. And because most of the times we're thinking about what we're going to say when that person's talking.
Right.
But if I anchor myself in my body, and that's a strong fortitude point, I think you'll hear what they say, and your response will be natural and appropriate to the moment, instead of me trying to manipulate. Because these guys are big that we roll with. Sometimes, Ryan, you can't move them where you want them. They're going to move where they want, and you have to be responsive and feel and see what the next best move is. And I think having a center point internally to yourself is the key to that.
I love that. I think that's a really great point. And, something that took me a lot to learn in is I've done multiple disciplines throughout my life. And probably the two or three most common was my lifelong wrestling, grappling, and then jujitsu, and then the Kali or the Eskrima, which is, more dynamic and impact with weaponry. And so and the firearms as well. But I think the allowance that you're talking about, I think that, something else that can't be moved. And so you have to navigate yourself around it. There's times, especially early in my jujitsu career, where I would chase the hands and I would try to block every single idea or movement or initiative that the opponent took. Where eventually I was saying, well, you can put your hand there all you want because that doesn't endanger me. You can move your body to this position and that doesn't endanger me. And then the subtleness and the gentleness of the art is I will slowly put myself in position with limited or no resistance from you because I'm being gentle and subtle, and then I will capture the victory by knowing the center of where the position is, the technique lies, and this is the resolution to this conflict. So in business and the relationships, what I'm kind of hearing you say in summary is that the ability to center yourself and have the confidence and the presence of mind makes you a clearer, more responsive, more capable partner, leader, husband, etc.
And like from your background too, Ryan, it also gives you the ability to distinguish between a perceived threat and a real one.
Yes.
Most of those things that are happening to you are perceived threats. That's when your emotion gets involved.
Right.
If you train and expose yourself to that enough, you start realizing most of this is fluff.
Right.
There's some actual things that I need to pay attention to, but you have to kind of expose yourself to that and relate it. But yeah, definitely. Yeah. Right on.
Yeah. And that's a statement I want to echo, because you said perceived versus real threat. And I think about the business owner who's constantly dealing, especially the small business owner, the entrepreneur who's dealing with potential threats all over. And if they were to basically freak out and react in some type of emotional or extreme way to each threat. They burn themselves out, burn out their resources, when most of the little areas of friction and the speed bumps along the way are not genuine threats to the company, to the staff, and ultimately to your vision and dream of your business. And to be able to discover that through martial arts, Jason, I think is a beautiful thing. I think we've got time for one or two more questions. So I want to ask a little bit more about balance, but in a different way. So there are some pretty rigorous demands of being a martial artist, especially if you're going to invest yourself in any way. But you are investing yourself as an instructor. You know, you have various instructor teacher roles based on the discipline. And so you have to continue to grow yourself, to mentor yourself and be the perpetual student while running a business. You want to be profitable. You want to be able to do this for the rest of your life and support your family. And then, of course, get the service provided, successful students and stuff like that. So there is a balance between making money, making the family happy, making yourself the best version of providing the resources and having successful products, which is successful students. Those responsibilities, how has martial arts helped you run your martial arts business?
Well, I think when you were asking that, Ryan, what I immediately thought of was that I'm very fortunate within martial arts is that the martial art is not compartmentalized for me. Those principles that I'm training, even when I'm by myself, are principles that move across categories, across the category of family, of business, of thing. I'm using the same principles all the way across. Now, it can take some time for you to see how that principle crosses those categories. But once you do, and you've been in the business for a while, you'll start to see. So it's not so much, it is a balance in the sense of your time that you're putting in, but it makes it much easier if you can know that those, they're not particular in the place you're standing at the time. That martial concept is through the whole thing. You know, that's helping me through every single bit of working with my family. So that tends to be the balance for me, you know, that I know when I have when I'm having a conversation with my family or a coworker, I'm working on my technique as well. So
Gotcha.
there's not a conflict there between, oh, well, I'm not getting the train today. I'm having to deal with this.
So your balance
being
is
to deal with this is part of the
they
training.
all flow together. I like that
Yes,
they're not compartmentalized, so you don't have to switch from one to the other constantly, but
right.
instead,
And they don't feel cheated. I don't feel cheated one way or the other, right?
oh, that's awesome. So that's a
Yeah.
good one. So let me throw the last question tonight at you before we have to close out the episode.
Okay.
So give me out some advice. Give us a little dime or two of advice on what you would say to entrepreneurs. They're out there, and you just want to say, hey, the value to martial arts is this to help you personally and professionally develop. Here's my top two pieces of advice on why it's important and valuable to you.
Yeah. I think do something that you truly enjoy. And I know that sounds cliche, but if it's truly something you internally enjoy, if everything is taken away from you. I had a conversation with Wayne one time about, I was joking with him. He's one of my older students. And I said, what if I told you, Wayne, that I'm not going to promote you anymore and you're probably not going to get any much better. Do you want to come back Thursday and practice? And he said, well, I could get past the rank. I'm a little older, but I don't know if you told me I'm not going to get much better. What's the point? And I said, okay, so we don't want to train Thursday then. He said, well, no, I want to train. And I said, what for? You're not going to get any better. And he said, but I'd miss it. And I said, that's it, then. That's it. So you've moved beyond reward, right? So we want to do things not for the result, but for the process of doing it. And I think that would that would knock in the head probably 99% of the things as an entrepreneur. When things get too much, recenter and do those things, and it's going to work out. If the process is good and it's quality and you're paying attention to what you're doing, the outcome will be fine. But I don't think you can focus on result. I think you have to focus on the moment. Process.
That's a perfect place for me to jump in because that was so poetically said. So
Yeah.
let me do this, Jason. People obviously probably recognize that you are an expert in both the philosophy and the execution of martial arts and martial arts training. If somebody wanted to get a hold of you in any way or contact Three Rivers Academy, how do they find you, sir?
They can contact me through there's a phone number they can call the academy. I don't know if it was on the screen or not. And then through the website, threeriversacademy.com. They can look at us through there. If they want some more of these concepts, I have a book on Amazon, Light on the Gentle Art, and they can go. So some of these concepts of equanimity and things that we talked about, if they wanted to have that fleshed out a little bit more, they can take a look at that. And if you're in Paducah, Kentucky, just look us up and stop in and say hi. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Jason, I appreciate everything you said tonight. And Light on the Gentle Art, your book, that is an absolutely great read and has decades worth of expertise in it. So to my audience, I just want to tell everyone you've heard a lot tonight about change and development and how it affects you. So I just want to remind you to go out into that world, and I want you to see the change and be the change. And we will catch you next time on Pivotal Change.
This has been a Now Media Networks feature presentation. All rights reserved.